My guest today is a stand-up comedian from Olympia, Washington. He has a comedy special on DryBar titled One Third of the Room, and is the winner of the Seattle International Comedy Competition and the Laughing Skull Comedy Festival in Atlanta. I'm excited to welcome Gabriel Rutledge.
Thank you. I feel I have a shirt on from the Laughing Skull Festival, so I really feel like a dick right now.
I noticed you were just...
like, you're going to mention this, right?
Is it? Yeah, you're contractually obligated through them.
I try to get my wife to read my credits every morning. Does not happen.
Yeah, never. That would be so creepy, dude.
What if that was like my my alarm when I woke up?
It's your daily affirmations or whatever.
7:30 a.m. Like, winner of the Seattle International Comedy Competition has appeared on comedy. I'm like, I'm ready for the day.
So I had Kermit on last week, Kermit Apio, and we were talking about the Montana Run. The stages, the Montana Run movie.
Oh yeah.
And that sounds like something straight out of that movie. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know he was in it either. I had no idea. He's in the elevator.
He's
in one of the scenes.
Fuckable in it too. He's so adorable, young Kermit.
He looks. Yeah, he was a very good looking. Like, I mean, not that he's a bad looking guy now, but it's like It's crazy to me. That's one of the things I want to talk to you about today is just, I mean, you guys have known each other for a long time and you're both comics and like getting older in this area. Like that must be wild in its own way, right?
Yeah, it's very wild. Like when I started, the people that I looked up to, like at the time, I thought they were, they'd been doing it forever. But some of them had not been doing it that much longer than me, really.
Yeah.
But like, I started in 2000.
Okay.
And so Kermit was already headlining. Brad Upton, Dwayne Goad. I'm probably forgetting people.
Kermit told me in the last episode, I want to have Brad on, but apparently he has what's it called? A file box with a note card of every set he's ever done at every venue. Yeah,
that's on the spectrum. But aren't we all, Adam?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's fucking, but that's like, he was talking, I mean, Kermit gave you praise for your work ethic and him and Brad as well, just in terms of like always trying to get better, always doing what he can. And he was saying Brad's just like, his professionalism is off the charts in terms of...
No, I agree with that. And I didn't know a lot about comedy before I started doing comedy.
Yeah.
I was aware of George Carlin. I liked Chris Rock's specials, that kind of thing. But I was not like a big student or connoisseur or the first time I ever went to a comedy show, I performed on it.
That's crazy.
Which was the Comedy Underground in Seattle, RIP.
Dude, do you want to know something nuts?
Yeah.
And I've been meaning to tell you this for a while, the last show that I went to before I tried stand-up was your show on New Year's Eve a couple years back at Comedy Underground.
Oh,
so it was like, I guess it would be 3 years or so now. And then that spring I ended up going out. And I think it may have been the second to last show. We'll say it's the last one just for...
I like it. You know what? If you were watching that show and you were like, fuck, I could do that.
I mean, part of me, it wasn't what you were doing, but the openers. Like, I had never thought that stand-up was accessible in Seattle.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, like, I thought everybody that was on that show was working comedians, like full-time comics. And then I found out slowly, like, everybody has a day job and, like, it's...
Yeah, that was similar to my experience in 2000, although it was a smaller scene then.
Yeah.
But it was, I met people that night who were talking about they had performed at a show and been paid. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I doing here? And then, 6 months later, I'm like, oh, that person is a mentally insane person. I don't know who paid them to do comedy, but everything seems, like you said, it's so unobtainable and like everything seems huge. And
I think that's entertainment across the board, though. I've heard Bill Burr talk about this where like at every stage in his comedy career, he realized that it's sort of, there's just a lot of like playing the part, like I mean, I want to get into some of like how you developed and stuff, but I have to assume that first time you headlined, it sounded like there was you've done all these things and now you're ready to headline. Like
That's absolutely correct. You don't say no.
Yeah.
Like if someone says, do you want a headline, and you have 4 minutes, maybe then you say no. But for the most part, you're never, there's all these phrases people say in comedy, but one of them that I do remember is you're always 5 years away from where you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
So when you first go, I'm a headliner, 5 years later, you're like, maybe now.
Yeah.
So I do think that's always true. Whatever. First time hosting at a club, first time doing 30 minutes, first time, all that stuff, you just do it. You're just faking it till, hopefully you make it,
Dude, I started hosting like, I think 3 or 4 months in. Like I had like a 5 minutes from doing like a class and then like some open mics and stuff, but like it was you don't have any process for it. And do you know Yadoye Travis? He's a New York comic.
I don't think so.
He headlined out here. It was at Laughs, and it was the first time I was hosting, and I was terrified. And as he was walking up, I was introing him, and I forgot his name.
Of course.
Which is the one thing, like, you can fuck up the credits, you can fuck up everybody's intro, but if you miss the headliner's name, it's such an L. Like, it's so bad.
Yep.
And I tried to stall. So, like, I was like, this guy's been on Comedy Central. He's the very popular and famous... You don't, and it hit me like I called this name out, and he comes up and he goes, "We got to address this for a second. Like, I am not famous or popular in any way. Like, it was 45 minutes of just sitting there, like, what is wrong with me? Like, why did I do that?
Look, I will tell you my worst name fuck up ever, which is this is my excuse. I wasn't that new into comedy. I was pretty new, but I'd driven to like Northern California. Gas was 4 cents a gallon. I took a pony part of the way. And it was me and one other person and Jackie Cation.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is probably before 2005. And she said, I was familiar with her, but she said, because I was doing the intros at this casino, and she said, it's Jackie Cation rhymes with vacation, which, hey, great hint.
Yeah.
Right?
Easy.
Jackcation rhymes with vacation. I did my set. It went fine. I don't know what happens between, it's like you go up when you're hosting, you have all these thoughts. I got to say this, there's these drinks, all this stuff. And then you do your set and you're a baby. You're like, I don't know. I have no memory. So I'm introducing her. I remember, she had a Comedy Central half hour at the time. I'm like, she's got a 30-minute special on Comedy Central. And I say Jackie, and I know she gave me this great clue, right?
Yeah.
And all I could remember was rhymes with sandwich. Which, by the way, nothing rhymes with sandwich.
Yeah.
There ain't a goddamn, might as well be orange. Nothing rhymes with sandwich. And so I ended up saying, like, please welcome Jackie Kasowska, like some sort of Polish thing. It was so bad. And again, just the shame that washed. And then, of course, I'm like, I'm so sorry I messed up your name. She's like, everyone does. I'm like, but I wasn't going to be everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
So it happens, which is why I never really get that mad. I mean, I will make fun of, if the host is like, a very, very good friend of mine, and then they read it, Gabriel Rutledge. I'll be like, yes, good friends. All my good friends write my name down.
Exactly. You have to. I mean, if you don't address it, it's weird too. So that's so funny. That hosting stuff, it's very tricky actually. Like, and I don't drink, so like I imagine like trying to host drunk is gotta be the hardest thing ever.
Well, I don't like that you assume I host drunk, Adam. I actually don't drink before comedy ever.
I I didn't assume that about you, but I
think
those
that
bigger
about,
rooms,
yeah.
like, you know, like Tacoma and stuff, like it's, if I was hammered, I can't imagine getting any of this stuff right.
Even more than that, I mean, a certain amount of drinking I could do probably and be fine. But people who get high before every show, I'm like, how do you do this?
I don't understand it.
How is this possible?
The whole, at least, I don't know.
You would never remember her name. If I was high, I would forget I was even doing. I don't smoke a lot, so that's a vacation for me. That's a rhymes with vacation for me. When it's just like I'm, you know, who knows what'll happen.
What, like, have you done a headlining set Stone?
Not headlining. I've done those themed shows.
Yeah, the dope shows.
Yeah, and it's usually been fine. I don't.
Well, you have so much muscle memory too.
Yeah, I think what I'm always afraid of when I do those shows where you do a set sober and do a set high is I'm afraid either I will do my act shittily or I will start riffing on something that is just preposterous stoner funny. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll say something. You know, I'm afraid of losing control a little bit. Like, what did I say? Oh no! Like, and so but that has never happened. And it's usually there's kind of this sweet spot for me. I don't really like to do those shows, but the last few times I did them, I was like, if I do something almost like not brand new, but something I don't have established yet as far as material. Mm-hmm. Like I kind of know what this joke is, but it's not like locked in yet. And that's like the sweet spot for being stoned because maybe it'll go a different direction, but you still have somewhat of a map for it.
Yeah.
And then
it's not just completely brand new.
Yeah. Because that's what I was afraid of just like, you know, just like you are sitting around with your friends where you're like, you know, couch is a weird word. Yeah. You know, that kind of shit. You're like, oh.
Exactly.
That's what although the audience would probably like that. Also, don't love a stoned audience. That's not fun.
Is it? Yeah, I was curious about that because they got to be either slower or like what?
Yes, that is. And I tend to, because I'm, you know, I've been doing comedy since 2000. And so I think about things like laughs per minute and things like that. So mm-hmm. I go pretty quick. I'm going like, I don't want you to get distracted. I'm like,
yeah.
And
I was watching your Boise set on YouTube, and I mean, that was kind of like, there were a couple moments in there where like you had to deal with a situation.
Yeah.
And just, but it's so rapid. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen you perform live, but like enough to know that that's kind of the style, and it is tight, you know?
Yeah, there's different ways to do it. You know, every once in a while I'll do a joke and then I'll pause in a spot that I don't normally. Mm-hmm. And then the laugh just keeps going. And I go, man, I would have so much material if I slowed the fuck down.
Exactly.
But I also, what I like, the feeling of is like, I don't know, the style I'm going for, and it depends on the room and everything else, but the style I'm going for is I don't let the laugh die all the way. I press it. I press it. I'm kind of going for physical exhaustion.
Yeah, momentum.
By the end of the show, I want people to just be like, Jesus Christ, I'm exhausted, you know? But that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a stoned audience.
No.
Especially, you know, I do a lot of callbacks and stuff, and like stoned audience
miss it.
Yeah, they're just like, or it's like 2 ticks slow, like, oh, from before? Yeah, like, yes, from before. But I will say, I won't say which show it was, but I did one of those stoner shows. They were worried about the, I guess, getting shut down by the liquor board or something. Because Washington State liquor board's in charge of weed. All of a sudden, they just threw that on them now. Like, jeez. But they were afraid of, because the shows are legal, but it's also like,
it's a weird gray area.
Yeah. Especially in the beginning. And so the promoter of the show was worried about being shut down, and we did not get high. We did our sober set. He said, we're not going to smoke pot because I don't want anyone to get caught smoking pot. I don't want to, you know. We went up and we did our second set, and no one even noticed. And then my reaction was like, can I do this every time?
Yeah. Just save the weed for later.
Yeah, no one in the crowd was like, they don't seem that high.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly when you have people that are already stoned, too.
Yeah. Yeah, you assume everyone's on your level when you're stoned. That's the beauty of it, where, like, you know, you're looking at your cat and you're like, I think Fluffy's feeling it right now. It's that kind of thing. So I was like, you know, comedy already is like, what a weird thought. So it's like, whatever you're doing, they're like, look at this stoned logic.
And you throw any context out the window.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty funny that it was like.
That is funny. I got to make a plug here really quick. So if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure and hit that like, share, subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any upcoming content. And also, if you have a question for myself or Gabe, throw it in there. Doing so will help us with the algorithm so new people find our stuff. I did want to ask you about your special for DryBar. Like that kind of, when did you do it? Like, didn't COVID throw a wrench in that a little bit?
Yeah, this is my DryBar path. I got asked to do a DryBar comedy special very early. And I am good at business. And so I said, no fucking way.
Really?
Look, it was pitched like there's this Mormon company that wants to do clean comedy specials. Mm-hmm. There was mention of an app and some back end and a payment up front, but I just thought, I don't, nothing against anyone's beliefs, but even if it was any, you know, if it was a whatever, a Christian, a Catholic, a Muslim specials, anything, I'm just like, that's not the idea of like comedy specials finally Mormons can enjoy. I'm like, that's no thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you shot it in Utah, right?
Yeah, they do shoot it in Utah.
And you've performed quite a bit in Salt Lake, right?
I have, actually not in a while. But that's the other thing is I do clean shows all the time for whatever, private events and things like that. So I knew I could do it, but I was just like, I don't know what this is. I'm going to say no. And then I saw many of my peers and friends specials, you know, their clips start popping on YouTube and Facebook, especially back then.
Yeah, because Kermit mentioned they were pushing ads on there quite a bit.
They were, and I saw
everyone that you saw was not you, and you're just like, I made a phenomenal business decision.
And at first I thought, okay, the exposure, and they look great too. They're super professional quality, super well done. And
kind of like this podcast, right?
I mean, a bit.
Yeah.
Finally, a podcast that Mormons can enjoy.
Exactly. If you want to do a quick promo for our Mormon audience out there.
Hi, pray for us. So I was a little bit like, oh, maybe I should have done that. Also, at that time, I had a couple of Facebook clips that were doing really well. I had one that was like 7 million views through something else that had swearing in it. So I'm like, I'm doing it my way, you know. Also, again, I was raised in an evangelical Christian household. Part of the reason I do comedy is so I can travel the world talking about naughty things and saying naughty words.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was like, whatever. And then some of the people I was talking to started telling me about the actual money they were making from their DryBar. And that's when I knew I had fucked up.
Yeah.
Especially because the ones in the beginning were the ones that really popped. So then I said, oh, I'll be honest, I turned it down twice. And then I was like, what am I doing? I have nothing else going on, you know? So I messaged, I said, can I do it? It was supposed to tape March 2020. So about, I think 3 weeks before I was going to tape, obviously the whole world shut down. And then in September 2020, they said, we're going to start shooting specials again. And but you know, limited crowd, limited capacity. It's going to be, I think the first thing they told me was like 150 people. And I think it's normally 300 around.
Yeah.
In that, you know, there's like an upper seating and everything.
Utah was in a different place with vaccination stuff than Washington. And I honestly, I've had a couple of people come on and the topic of vaccination has come up, and it's just better if we don't like discuss personal beliefs on that, just because
it's fine.
Like you've had to navigate that enough as it is.
No, that's fine. I'm vaccinated, but I don't.
Same here, but
whatever.
I'm like for this podcast, I just like
understood. Let's keep those YouTube comments out of that section. So then they're like, it's gonna be 150. I'm like, okay, that's enough. And then it went to 100. It's gonna be 100. I'm like, By the time I taped it, and also I was barely doing comedy shows.
That was my question for you. Is like you're not. I mean, most of the time when people want to do specials, they want to be hitting it in stride.
Well, what I did, which ended up being really cool, is I just said on social media, I'm like, if you live somewhere in the Northwest and you want me to come perform in your backyard, I will do it. And I booked 20 shows in a day.
Wow.
So thank God. Thank whatever God.
And how did you do that sound-wise? Did you have
a karaoke machine?
Really?
Yeah. I just rolled in a karaoke machine. And
did you buy it during the pandemic?
No. My wife bought it from Costco like 5 years ago. And honestly, I was like, what the fuck? Why did you buy a karaoke machine? Yeah. And then every time I wheeled that thing out to do a gig, she'd be like, see? Like she saw it coming. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I knew this was a business decision.
Yeah, that's a great... And it has kind of opened some stuff up as a result of that happening.
Like, I'm sure. I mean, I'm mostly booked, but I'm doing one in like a month.
Yeah.
Because someone asked me to, and I'm like, yeah. I'm not. One COVID thing is like, if someone, especially in 2021, if someone would have said, I want to record you in the back of a flatbed truck on the freeway, and we're gonna live stream it.
Yeah,
I'd be like, all right. I'm dead inside.
Yeah, were you
like, whatever?
What did you do? Like, did you have to go back to work at all during that time?
Yeah, I delivered groceries for Walmart for a while.
And arguably, I mean, you're one of the top earners in this region for comedy, and like that. Because I had caught wind of that a little bit. Somebody had like mentioned it to me, and it just like blew my fucking mind. Because I'm like, you've been doing this for 20 years, right?
Yeah. That was a real. It wasn't. There was no like shame, or it wasn't like, oh, I can't believe I'm an accomplished comedian and now I'm delivering groceries. It wasn't like that. But it was more like, it was like an identity loss.
Yeah.
Of who the fuck am I?
Well, Luke Severide had, he's talked to me about this a couple times, like that emotional aspect of that, of just like half of who, like his professional life just disappeared.
Yeah.
And having to deal with that, not only the financial ramifications, but then the emotional aspects of it, like the identity stuff. You didn't ever have to deliver groceries to somebody you performed for, did you? Because that would have...
A couple times.
Fuck.
It's funny because I wrote a book that year that, it's being edited. It'll be out in 2050. But that was one of, like, my postcard for 2020. Like, my photograph that was never taken of what that year was like is... I was delivering to someone's house, and I was actually it was the neighbor. The neighbor knew me from comedy, so they were like out smoking, and they saw me like delivering, and they go, "Hey, are you Gabriel Rutledge?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I thought they were looking at their Walmart app, right? And they go, "Oh man, my mom and I saw you perform at a comedy." She's like, "Can I take a picture with you?" And that, I wish I said text me a copy of that picture, because the trunk of my Kia Rio was open. I'm wearing a mask. She's not. we're posing for like a selfie. I'm holding like a couple of cases of Diet Dr. Pepper. And it's like, that was 2020. You know what I mean? That's what that was like. Now, I still was doing some comedy shows in states that weren't shut down and stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, I debated doing them all, but I ended up, that was another thing, is it's like, especially when unemployment kicked in and stuff, it was like, man, this is not all healthy. Like, I didn't say no to anything. Mm-hmm. I didn't say no to one fucking thing in the pandemic.
Did you feel like any shaming associated with that?
Oh yeah. I kept it low. Very low. I wasn't like, hey, check me out at the Wichita Looney Bin, mm-hmm. because at that time there was a lot of sort of hate or judgment, even in the comedy community. There was a lot of judgment of like, how dare you, you know, you're going to kill my grandma, whatever. And so it was like, it was really weird. And not that I saw the future coming, but the reality is all of those judgy people, they came back when it wasn't any fucking safer.
Yeah.
That's the reality. At every level of, some of the headliners are like, how is anyone out on the road right now? I'm like, well, we don't all have Netflix specials that we're sitting on, or podcasts with tons of Patreon money. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, how come the bartender at the comedy club is some sort of working class hero, but I'm an asshole because I'm also working? Like, I didn't quite understand. I get the logic of like, maybe we shouldn't be going out right now, but I didn't quite get the logic of, yeah, I guess it's unessential, but if it's what you rely on for money, it is essential. And
it's a fucking complicated situation.
Very.
Like I told you we avoid vaccination conversation and we go straight into COVID ramifications. I mean, it ties into your DryBar stuff, so like it's related. But there was a long period of time where like I kept a day job throughout that entire time, and I was very lucky for that. Like to even catch wind that was what you had to do to support your family. Like, I don't think most people understand, like, as somebody that went to go see you live before getting into comedy, I never would have even considered that was a length that you would have to go to support your family. And it's crazy because I went to your show and I remember seeing you set up merch afterwards, and it's so like it's a memory now for me. Mm-hmm. But like, you had that book you wrote. What's the name of it?
Happiness Isn't Funny: True Stories of a Road Comic.
I check it out on Amazon.
Yeah,
and buy it. It's fucking good. If you're a newer comic, there's a lot of really good stuff in there. I read it like a couple months into comedy, and it paints a picture of like road comedy. And I just had no idea how much that merch line matters, you know, and like how much, like, that's your point of sale and your lifeline.
It's true.
And like, if people can throw some money there, like, it's because everything else as a comic that you do, there's someone in between taking a piece of it.
Right.
And that's part of the deal, but it also just sucks because you're getting like a percentage on the dollar, a very small percentage a lot of the time. You know, like when you're sitting and you have 300 people in a room and you know what you're getting compared to what they made on the door, it's tough, you know?
Yeah, it's very tough. And it's, but it's also, you know, this is kind of some post-COVID or whatever we're calling now, clarity, where it's like, you know, there's a million things to complain about. It's like a very, very challenging but incredibly fun way to make a living.
Oh, for sure.
Stand-up comedy. I said in that book, being a professional comedian is a loophole in adulthood.
Definitely.
It's like, it's ridiculous, but it's also, you know, there are challenges, but it's like, I don't know. I just feel like enjoying the ridiculousness of it again, because it's when it kind of goes away, you're like, oh yeah, this is preposterous that I stand in front of a room and go, by the way, listen to me, turn off all your phones. I need your 100% of your attention for the next hour or whatever. That's a preposterous thing to tell people to do. And so it's like, you can get really hung up on what you don't have. And sometimes people get hung up on what I don't have in a weird way. That might sound arrogant, but sometimes people see me perform comedy and they assume I'm perhaps more successful than I am, because it's like, hey, you were great. How come you're not on this or that? Or, so you can get really hung up on what you're not doing, but I do feel like, and I still, it's faded a little bit, but I do have that feeling of, let's just enjoy, I'm also 48. So it's like, let's just enjoy this life. Let's enjoy, I've spent so much time getting good at it, and who fucking cares where it's going? For sure. It doesn't,
Let me ask about that a little bit, because you started in Olympia?
Yeah.
That's not a hotbed for comedy.
No,
that I know of, at least. I mean, I know a few people that work out of there, but it's not like, it's like, look at these Olympia killers.
You could say Olympia is not a hotbed for ... and then fill in almost anything.
Might be a hotbed for meth, though, right?
Yeah,
it's
what?
Decent.
That's what they should put on the sign, is welcome to Olympia. More homeless than you'd think. Per capita, we're hanging in there. But I think I said in the book that'll be out someday, starting a comedy career in Olympia is like taking swimming lessons with cement shorts. Yeah. It's like, look, I'm 30 minutes from Tacoma, I'm an hour from Seattle, but it's like, it's just not, especially then, and now it's like a very popular move for some very established comedians to be like, whatever, they were in LA and now they live in Ohio or Nashville.
Oh yeah.
Or, what I'm missing in that story is, I never went, it's like, my story should be like, and then I moved to Hollywood because I sold the pilot for the Gabriel Rutledge show. It didn't work out. And then I was like, fuck it, I'm a road comic, and I moved back to Olympia. I'm missing that whole middle chapter of that story, but I'm still doing it.
For sure.
And that's another thing that, to circle it back to when you first started comedy and you were like, I didn't know you could do this. Look, it's hard as hell. It's harder now, but there's never been a good time to be a comedian.
Definitely.
Or alive. There's never been a good time to be alive. That's both of those things are true. But it's like, there's more competition, and they book more famous people now than they ever did. All that is true, but it's like, you can just do it. You can just fucking start doing it. Like, I don't think people realize that. You might be terrible. You might never go anywhere. You don't have to like win a lottery to, you don't have to do Joe Rogan, then start comedy. You don't have to like, in the way that you don't have to win American Idol to start you can just start singing. Like, no one.
Such a bizarre thing though.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hypothetically, if you were to get that Rogan and then do comedy, it would be the worst show anyone has ever seen, right?
Well, I think there's a very fairly famous comedian podcaster who started comedy because of Joe Rogan, and you can read those YouTube comments. It's not going well,
for sure.
But it is another beautiful thing about stand-up comedy is there's so many cheat codes to success. There's so many cheat codes to like fame. You can sell out a stadium because of fame. There's so many cheat codes. You could have a popular podcast or be on a TV show or be friends with someone, or there's all those cheat codes, but there are zero cheat codes to getting good at comedy. There's none.
Yeah.
There's no other, the only way to get good at stand-up comedy is just boring repetition, keep working at it. And even then it might not go anywhere. That's the reality of it. But that I think there's a beauty of that. There's a beauty in that. You can't fake that. You can't.
What helped you the most? I mean, because from the time that you started to the time that you won the competition out here, how long was that?
4 years.
Okay. I thought it was 2. So that.
I got 6th place after 2 years. But when you were talking about Montana runs, that's the first time I headlined. I had been doing comedy 2 years. And by doing comedy, I mean from my first open mic to that show in Helena, Montana, where they were like, can you do an hour? Because the booker, Tribble, very famous Dave Tribble, who just retired, I think, but he was like, I got good reports on you. I'm going to headline you next time. I'm like, great. And then I'm like, oh, shit. And so I definitely remember in Helena, Montana, I was supposed to do an hour. I did 54 minutes. I will always remember that amount of time because I'm like, that's close enough.
Were you recording with like how did you?
I think just on my phone, I was just recording the amount of time. I think I was running a timer.
So it was like 2008-ish or 2000.
No, this was like 2002.
So you had that on your phone already?
I didn't have it wasn't like a voice memo. It was a timer. It was like a.
Oh, gotcha.
I think that's what it was.
Recorder.
Yeah, it was. You know what? That's a good question. I do remember it was 54 minutes. I don't know how. Maybe I just did math, but.
But did you guys used to use tape recorders? Okay. Because I heard like stories of him like whipping the recorder against his hotel room out of anger.
If you were a comedian who was serious about their craft in the early 2000s, you had one of those little tape things.
Yeah.
You would either bring it on stage with you or leave it at your table just so you could, listen to it later or whatever. Mm-hmm. You want to hear a real old man story? And this is later because it's crazy. It's like YouTube didn't exist when I started. We had to physically mail. Like, I was at the very end of mailing VHS tapes to like bookers and comedy clubs.
And did they even watch them?
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. And then it was like, there was a period of time it was like DVR, CDR, and it was like always the wrong format. If a booker did watch it, they'd be like, didn't work on my computer. When I booked Comedy Central in 2009, and even then, they said, send a DVD to this address. So even then, and now it's like, it's so much easier to be ignored now. You can just send a link or whatever. And even for a while, YouTube was like 10-second clips. All that stuff has changed so crazily. But yeah, when I realized I have sent VHS tapes out to seek employment in comedy, I'm like, yeah, I have been doing it a while.
Dude, Kermit said... He told the story about Hedberg, like getting in a van and driving across the country and shit, and like just going to clubs and like doing the mic and then trying to get booked as an MC and shit. And it's all that stuff was on the phone, like phone books and shit. Like I can't imagine the stuff we have right now with Facebook groups is still pretty shitty. Like it's not organized in any way. Like there are some people that have been proactive about like sort of organizing these things, but it seems like with comedy, like everybody goes through that cycle of, starting and then starting to book shows and do that stuff. And like once that stuff doesn't apply to you anymore, you don't care about it at all. So unless you catch people that are like really motivated early to make this open source thing better, it's not going to be improved.
There would be people who are like, oh, so-and-so, they have a whole folder of like all these contacts for all these clubs across the country. And then you'd work with them someday and they're like, you want to look at my, it was like this gold information. Like, you ever watch Glenn Ross?
Yeah.
Like, I've got the leads.
And that would but was that for real how you started getting traction and stuff? Or was
it's still how I get traction.
Yeah.
It's exchanging of information. Who books that? Sometimes you can use their name, sometimes you can't, that kind of stuff. It's kind of still, it's a numbers game. No one, a club I have never worked before, if they get an email, not from my manager, because I don't have one, but just from me that's like, I'd like to work there, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I still send them sometimes, but it's like, it's not, I'm not on their radar, and that's fine. I probably shouldn't be, but but if it's so-and-so said I should book you, that's still different. That's
for sure. It's still like the gold standard of
For sure.
Just references and shit.
And other bookers, like I'll work a club that's like, I'm going to call this club on your behalf. That's what happened in Vegas is I worked for Brad Garrett's comedy club. That manager was like, I'm going to call across the street and get you in at the Laugh Factory. I'm like, great.
That's so rad, dude.
Because I've emailed that guy 100 times and it never, you know, I mean, it takes something different, you know?
Well, it's a very strange industry too, where like the only objective thing that we have probably is like numbers and like logos and brands, right? Yeah. So it's like this special got this many views. I guess YouTube's helpful in that way to like sort of like quantify some of this shit. But somebody who's been doing it just as long as you could make the argument, I've been doing it for this many years or whatever, and not know what they're doing. It's the same thing that you talked about at the beginning, is you can get in just as easily at the beginning as anybody else. There's no barrier to entry, which then leads to massive amounts of riffraff. And like, I can't imagine on the Strip, across the Strip, how much bad comedy there is. Like,
well, I don't know. The Vegas, that's a very weird scene. Not like the scene of people who work at the big rooms in the casinos, but it's a very weird place to do comedy. One, it's just to work and like to start your comedy career in the shadow of all these giant showrooms, but you're at like some
side room.
Yeah, which is fine. We do that here too, but it's also a pretty wild scene of like, especially being from the Seattle area, where you just watch comedy that's like, I think that person might be arrested. But yeah, I mean, actually, to circle that back a little bit about when I delivered groceries, that's actually because in comedy, we're all trying to solve this puzzle, and it's different for everyone, and one person's path is not your path. Or you look at someone successful and you're like, how'd you do it? And it's like, we're all asking, we're asking lottery winners how they won.
Yeah.
And they go, I don't know, I picked 5, 12, 17, 6, and 9, and I won. And we're like, that's what I'm going to do. It's not going to work. It's like, it's all different. And there's always something you should be doing, or at least we feel that I got to write a new joke. I got to email this person. I have this to do. You're never done. You're never clocking out. And I really loved deliver. I didn't want to do it as a career, but delivering groceries was so black and white and simple. I got a ding on my phone. I drove to a Walmart. They loaded up my car. I went to their house. I hit a thing on my app. It was so... I'm done. It had a beginning. It had an end.
It's so amazing. I had you come on to talk about like 20 years worth of experience in comedy, and you're promoting like, have you considered a day job? Because it's so much easier.
I mean, look, the whole goal is to not have a day job.
Yeah.
But as soon as you don't have one, you're like, fuck, that's a pretty good. Anyone who like uses the word hobbyist, I'm like, good for you. That's exactly what this should be for everyone.
Yeah.
And instead, we're all like, we have these big goals and dreams, and that's great. And some of mine have come true, and some of my goals have been accomplished. But it is, like I said, it's not like, oh, I like this better than performing comedy, but just the simplicity.
I was having that conversation this week with somebody where it's just like, can you imagine how simple life would be if I just did my day job and then, like, I don't know, went out on a date, or like, it's the amount of sacrifice that you make to do this thing. It's so much, but it's also extremely rewarding, and it's
incredibly rewarding and gratifying. At the same time, their lows are low, but it's like, I don't know. I'll sort of quote myself from a book that hasn't come out, but a thing I said in 2020 was, stand-up comedy is 200 nights of joy that still somehow ends up being a bad year. Because it's like, the shows are so fun, and that's a thought I had in that moment of a bad moment. But there is this like the great joy, and there's this great, but it's hard. You can't maintain that. You can't. I don't get that high anymore because I do so many shows. I don't get that high or that low, but it's like you can't. The feeling you have from like a great comedy show, there has to be a crash after it, just like a drug.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a price to be paid to feel that good. There is a price to pay. It's like the natural order of life is off in our brain when we get to go. Whatever day job you have, I bet they don't fucking clap when you show up.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that's not right. That's a new concept in the biology and evolution of the human brain to be like, I'm here. Thank you so much. So I'm not like super melancholy about it. I'm not a person who thinks we're all these sad clowns. I think there's just as many sad receptionists as there are sad comedians. Mm-hmm. But I do think there is a cost to any. Just like having children is like one of the most intense, incredible experiences of my life. There is a cost to that. There is a cost to, I wanted to travel the world doing comedy, and I do that. And there is a cost to that too. That's just the natural order of things. But one of the things, I came here to talk about Spark Delivery and Walmart Grocery. One of the things that was very interesting to me is I walk around with a low level of guilt always, because stand-up comedy, although it brings joy to the world, hopefully on a good night, it feels very selfish, and it is very selfish, because it's like, I miss a lot of my kids' activities. I miss a lot of time. I miss a lot of time with my wife, or there's a lot of sacrifice. My wife has to be in charge of my children when I'm gone by herself. That it's just, there's like this low level of like, I'm a good father. I'd be a better father if I was home more.
For sure.
That's just the reality.
That's as a comic, it's almost every relationship that you have. And I've seen it, like I worked with Big J at Tacoma, and I hung out with him in New York, and like at every level of comedy, that same type of thing. It's like, in order to do this thing, it takes so much of you, whether it's the writing, it's the performing, it's the business side of it, or whatever, that it removes your ability to be present for the people closest to you.
It does, and I battle to make that not the case, and I try. It's interesting because, I probably, I fly a lot. I'll say a couple times a month. And it's like, most people don't. Like, whoever, if my wife goes on a vacation somewhere to like Vegas, it's like 3 days later, she's like, I'm still kind of like messed, not like from drugs or alcohol, just from the travel or flying. And I'm like I come home like, I'm back. I'm not exhausted at all. My family's here. I'm like trying to like, but this is what life lesson time, for a pandemic for me, not that, who cares what the lessons were, but it was like, I was delivering groceries because all of my gigs were canceled. Like all of them. It was just fucking gone. You know what I mean? It's like, and so I was kind of doing it a lot because I was making money. I didn't know when things were going to come back. I didn't know how much money we were going to need. There was no unemployment yet. So it was like, I've been delivering groceries like 2 weeks. And my wife was like, do you think you could like maybe work less? Like I never see you. And I'm like, oh. So I felt guilty doing this job I love that honestly very few people on the whole fucking planet could even do. I was walking around with all this guilt because it's fun. Like, and then I started delivering groceries because it was a pandemic emergency. And I have the same exact guilt for a job that I'm only doing because it's an emergency.
For sure.
Like that was like one of those moments where I'm like, this is just life. This is just yes, my job makes me gone more often, but it's literally like if you talk to a trucker, a long distance trucker, and they have to be gone all the time, you kind of look at them like you almost respect their sacrifice. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm sure that's hard, but you got to provide for your family. I never give that to myself.
As a comic, not at all. Yeah.
Because it's like...
Because you get so much out of that.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I get people laughing and, all that stuff, and I get people saying nice things to me and a bunch of attention, and, sometimes I get to record a podcast in Everett. I mean, things are cooking for me right now. So Walmart keeps calling me. I'm like, I'm doing what I used to do. But it
would be great if they sponsored you though at some point. Like I know you're going to end up with material out of this too.
I haven't processed it yet.
Yeah. But there's still like, there's gotta be so much like it's just, and stuff keeps coming back related to COVID too, that God, it's crazy. I had a couple questions for you, like just about road work
stuff.
Should
I finish before the road work? Should I finish the DryBar thing?
Yeah, let's.
Okay,
yeah,
because I did. When I recorded, it was down to limited crowd of 50 people, but there was a big.
This number keeps every time you start the sentence.
By the way, I'm not done.
Yeah.
It's in not Ogden. Shoot, Provo, which is where BYU is. There was like a big COVID uptick. And so they sold 50 socially distanced tickets. 30-something, we recorded 2 shows, 30-something people showed up to each show, sitting like 12 feet apart, almost all of them wearing masks. And I was like, oh, this doesn't work. This is like not, I did fine. Like the shows were fine, but it was like, this isn't a special. This is like me turning a shit night into a decent one. It was, I felt, my lowest point of 2020 was right after I recorded the DryBar.
And especially for your style too, where you're like, you want to push through that laugh.
I do.
And it's like if the laugh just it's.
Also, my mic went out. For like, that was actually the highlight of the show because I had to riff about it. So, and
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, man, the night after it, that night in the hotel room after I taped those 2 shows, that in my mind went so terribly. And then the mic went out, and it's all these positive, very young people running the company. And I'm like, I don't think that worked, right? That wasn't enough people. And they're like, no, it's great. It was like difficult circumstances, but you made the best of it. And I'm like, well, that is not a good name for a special.
Not at all.
You know what I mean? I was feeling like that night in the hotel room. I wasn't serious, but in my head, I'm like, I'm glad I don't have heroin. I've never done heroin. I just want to get out of whatever this is right now. Yeah. Like I feel so, I had built it up that was like, this year sucked, but this DryBar special is going to save it. And then that sucked too. Okay. I was just like, fuck everything. At least I have Walmart grocery delivery to fall back on. So here's the thing. It's like they fixed it.
Yeah. They were able to.
They helped me out. You know what I mean? I don't think they added in laughs from a different show, but they know what they're doing. Yeah. It's fine. Is it amazing? Does it seem like I'm crushing like it would have in front of 300 people? No. But whatever.
I've literally seen specials with the room packed that they have to go in and edit sound. So, it's the material. It's you like.
I know it's.
Did it affect your performance and like what you did on stage, with the exception of the microphone going out?
Interestingly, the microphone going out, because I kind of talked about on stage. It would come in and come out until like for 10 minutes.
Oh, dude.
I was like waiting for them to bring me a new one, which is like a big thing. Apparently, I thought they'd have one ready to go.
Yeah.
But first show back after a pandemic, and so it was like, and then I'm talking, and I'm kind of killing the technical difficulties, to be honest. Like I'm getting much bigger laughs than I was when I was amplified.
For sure.
And I was just, I'm just like, oh my gosh, if there was a final class of comedy college, it's like a pandemic. There's 38 people here. You're wearing masks. You're all eating candy because you don't even drink here. I can't swear. I can't swear right now. Right now, I can't swear. Everything that's happening, don't take the Lord's name in vain right now. I'm killing this technical difficulty. And then finally, I get the mic, and then from the sound booth, the guy goes, okay, pick up wherever you feel comfortable. And I go, I think that was yesterday. And that got a big laugh. And then it's funny in the special, I say, I don't look like a guy who's doing very well financially. That's the beginning of that bit. And it gets an applause break because that's where the mic had gone out. So when you watch the special, it's kind of weird. The whole special's not out, by the way. It's just clips so far, but unless you have the app. But it's weird because it's like, I look like a guy who's not doing very well financially. And the crowd's like, yeah. It's like, why are they clapping? But it was because I was like coming back.
From all of that.
Yeah. So I feel by the time the special came out, I felt embarrassed. I felt sheepish, like, man, I was going to do heroin?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Because it ended up being really strong.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's...
Well, that's normal, too, for a comic to, like, get off stage and be like, I don't know. There's so much, like, perfectionism in comedy, too. Like, I went to New York, like, a month ago now, and you see, like, it's an unhealthy level of obsession of the craft. Like, you developed out here, you're doing like road stuff, like you were saying, like that's a different path there where it's like people want to do 7 to 10 sets a night. Yeah. And I mean, how did you get better? Like, what was it that you were mainly doing out here to where you went from that first show to?
Well, I think it's still true here, but it was more true in the early 2000s because there was just less comedians. Mm-hmm. Here, like people were asking me to do like opening work, not at comedy clubs, but whatever, like at a casino somewhere. I was like, whatever, a year into comedy, and people were like, can you do 30 minutes? And so I was getting paid to do 30-minute shows a year into comedy. That in LA or New York or most places in the world, or maybe even here now, is not happening.
Oh, for sure.
30 minutes is like, don't get me wrong, it was not a great 30 minutes, but it was like, it just forced me to, do that. I don't know, it's such a different thing to like the pacing and segues and all that. To do a long set like that is such a different kind of comedy than like nothing but 5-minute sets or whatever. And then I started doing all these rural Montana, North Dakota, Idaho, especially back then. I mean, now you go to little towns and it's like, you're next to some sort of fusion restaurant and there's a microbrewery and it's like a bunch of tech people who moved there on purpose. And
yeah.
Back then, small towns were like, it was people spitting in chew cans. And, yeah. I mean, that still exists.
I was at Ricky J's in Puyallup last night. I don't know if you've done that room.
Of course I have.
Yeah. And I think it probably fits the mold of what you're talking. Like, it's a room where, like, you can't go in there without someone wearing suspenders.
Yeah. But you know what? They're good ones because it's a weekend.
Oh, for sure.
Honey, wearing my good suspenders.
Well, I went down there for free, too. Like, my buddy had a show, and I just had an off night. I'm like, I just need to... I don't know. I have a hard time not working in comedy. Like, I just feel like if you're not doing something to push the ball forward, it's sliding backwards, and it's probably not a healthy mindset to have.
Have you considered grocery delivery? Because
it really takes that away.
It really takes the sting of ambition out of you. Yeah, I understand that idea. Like this week, I only had one show, kind of on purpose, because my daughter had a play I wanted to go to. But I ended up hosting a show in Olympia because I was just going to stop by, and then it turned into me hosting. Mm-hmm. It's and again, even in the pandemic, it made me realize, like, there's this line between you have to work hard and you have to get good and you have to get a certain amount of flight miles before you're a good pilot and whatever. Yeah. There is all of that. And then there's also just like, oh, this part of this is an unhealthy compulsion that whatever, if I don't do it, someone else will. They'll pass me by, or I'm going to lose my. That's when I kept saying yes to comedy clubs in 2020. It was like, I feel like if I say no, they won't call me anymore. Mm-hmm. And also, I want them to know I said yes, so they'll remember that. Yeah. And of course they don't. You know, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's like, no, no one's gonna. I didn't work for anyone in 2020 that people are like, and I will always book you because you had my back.
It's just an industry of people self-interested.
Yeah.
Whether it's the club owner, you, your fellow comic, like it's everybody. It makes sense. I mean, what you said, like it's this unhealthy thing of where like it's an hour of attention on you, and it's very self-serving. That goes for everybody.
Yeah.
In it.
Yeah, because I feel, I mean, I at least had the excuse that like this is my profession, but again, people who were just going to open mics when the pandemic started, the second they could go to open mics again, they're like, I'm back. I gotta, and that they don't even have the excuse of like, this is my profession.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and I would have done the same thing if I had started. If the pandemic happened in 2000, right after I had started, I would have still been.
It hasn't been about the money though.
No, it's not about like, that. It's really not that.
It's not. It is a compulsive thing, and I think that's that word is loaded, right?
Yeah.
But like, if you're an artist, like if you're a musician, you play drums. Like, if you have to drum every day, like there's a lot of stuff like this with people in the pandemic where they were like, they had to do this thing. If I play basketball, like I got to figure out how I play basketball during this thing.
I know.
And we just happen to be in a space where it's incredibly difficult. Like you said, like this, it's never been easy to be a comedian. This might be the peak in terms of how hard it was.
Yeah. And there's also that, well, it's not just comedy, but there's so much, there's so much talk of like hustle culture or grind or all these like, even take comedy out of it, just like rise and grind. And it's like, you work at a bank. What the fuck are you talking about? Do you know what I mean? What does that mean? Like, it's just like shit that you just did because you were a human. Like, I had better go to work and get some money so I can pay my bills has turned into like, you got to believe it to achieve it. You're like, what?
It doesn't make any sense.
What are we talking about? It kind of makes sense in sports or comedy or something like that. But even that, it's just like, because of podcasts, there's so much information on how to be a comedian now, and you start comedy, you listen to your heroes or people you look up to who are like, it has to be your only thing. No relationships, no children, no. Yeah. It's just like this. It sounds like you're enlisting in the military. Do you know what I mean?
Was that how it was when you started?
Yeah, kind of.
Really?
There was less. It was more of a mystery then. It was more of a it's more of a romanticized thing back then. It was more like when I when I would go to a show that I was opening and I had never met the other comedian, I would see a man in like an overcoat, duster kind of jacket, and I'd be like, I bet that's the headliner. Because it was like it was like, I don't know, left over from Kennison or something. It was just like, but it was just like every headliner I met was just like on their fourth marriage or like, like this is my lady was like the sort of the tone of everything. So it wasn't like hashtag grind, but it was like, this is
that still exists though. I mean, it's still that like idea of like you're looking up to the guy that's one level above you or whatever. And like I remember I did the Lime in Kirkland.
Sure.
And I think I did it with you one time, but I did it the first time I ever did it. Scott Losey was headlining the room. And I remember he came outside and I was talking to him like, I was like, you've done Bumbershoot? Like it was this unattained, like this, I thought that he was like, I don't know how much money I thought this guy was making doing comedy, but he was so like, he was just answering my questions genuinely, but I think he had no concept of how like mesmerized I was by his being. And like, I don't even think he does comedy anymore. Like,
I think he's kind of back. He's coming back. He's so funny, by the way.
He's very
hilarious.
funny, but like he did the show in shorts and like he went up on stage. He's like, he was just doing the gig because it paid and had free food. Like that was why he was there.
I remember both. I know both aspects of this. I remember being new and seeing someone and you look at them and you go, if I was ever that funny, my life would be made. Like if I can get that good and then you're like, oh, fuck, you work at Costco or whatever it is. I remember that disillusionment. And I've been on the other side of that now where I'm the one disillusioning it for other people. Even like this very much sums up my entire career as I did a show last night in Shelton, Washington at
I'd done that show.
El Sarape Mexican restaurant. And there were some people at that show who had seen me last month at the Laugh Factory at the Tropicana in Las Vegas, really liked me, went home where they live in Shelton, Washington, saw my poster in the bathroom, and they were like, oh shit, that guy's coming here? Like that is the whole picture. That is the reality of, I'm going to work a cantina in a Mexican restaurant in Shelton. I am going to work at a Las Vegas casino, and it's all kind of the same thing.
Which one do you like better? Gun to your head.
Gun to my head, I'm taking Vegas every time because it pays better and the food is free, and it's harder to get there. But I love doing those shows. I had a great time last night.
Yeah, I did that show recently, and shout out to Joke Masters. Amanda runs that, and she's awesome. Puts on a bunch of shows all over Washington State, but when I did it, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's rad to go to those spaces. There's kind of a stink for people like in Seattle proper on like these outskirt shows, and like, oh, you're gonna go to Chehalis or whatever. It's like those people are some of the best audiences because they're starved for entertainment. Like they're stoked. They're not like they don't have all these distractions and shit. Like they're coming, they're paying money. They want to see it. And a lot of times people go there and like shit on the area or shit on their politics and stuff. And like those people didn't pay money to like bring that with them. They like, there are certain things that you want to like, perform, like navigate, but like.
Depends what you want to do. It depends. If when I started, I kind of thought I'd be like David Cross or something. I don't know if you're familiar with the stand-up, but I thought I would be much edgier. I thought I would talk about society. And that's really hard to do. And I also think I'm just not that good at it. That's not what resonated with people. I would try to do that, and then I would make a joke about my wife, and people would laugh, and I go, oh, maybe that's my thing. I'm more relatable than I realized.
Yeah.
And so if you have a mainstream comedy act like I do, the beauty of that is you can go anywhere. I'm not making these huge adjustments to work Shelton or Vegas or the East Coast or the West Coast. I'm just, my act is already for everybody because that's how I write now, because that's what I know my audience is.
Does that bum you out ever? Or like, do you think that was when you started versus what you're doing now? Do you think that was kind of what you were going to end up doing anyway? Or do you think it's a reflection on the work that you got?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. It doesn't bum me out because living where I live and being able to do the things I've done, that comes from being mainstream. It comes from having an act that's supposed to be for everybody. The flip side of that is there are people who, every city, Seattle, San Francisco, Boston, certainly New York and LA, there's people who they would not be funny anywhere else.
Yep.
Or maybe they're not even funny all the time in those cities. They're not for everyone, but they're kind of doing. If people get them, they're
Are you talking about Sinbad?
Sinbad is for everybody. Dude, I will never. Sinbad is a fucking murderer.
Is he?
Sinbad is
see him at like EQC.
Sinbad's incredible. Anyway,
Sorry.
His outfits historically have not been for everybody, but it's even Mitch Hedberg, who you were talking about. He, especially in the beginning, I wasn't around for that past the beginning, but he wasn't for everybody. He bombed all the time because it was weird.
Well, that Kermit told me something crazy about that, and I really like it. Makes so much sense. The reason why he became the writer that he did was he realized like he had like a minute to get people up top if he was like emceeing or doing anything like that. So he figured out like if he compressed his jokes as short as he could get them, he had a way better chance. Whereas when he started, he was doing longer form stories, and people were like, "Who is this guy?" They would never
imagine that.
Yeah,
I can't imagine him doing long form stories.
Did you work with him at all?
Yeah, we dated for a couple of years. No, I worked with him three times. Actually, the last time was not that long before he died, and that was interesting because he was like still underground, sort of, but like big. You know, like people showed up to the shows wearing shirts with like punchlines from their favorite jokes of his on them. Like they made them themselves. I'm like, oh, this is like a different
I heard
level.
He had a very weird, like his audience looked like him.
There was a kid who showed up that week who was dressed like Mitch Hedberg dressed in his Comedy Central special. It was like the same outfit. It was like this different. And that's kind of what I mean about not being for everyone, is like a lot of Mitch Hedberg fans were like, I get this guy, but he's not for everybody. So there's like a connection there. There's like a this is my guy kind of thing. What was really interesting about working with him is he had last night I did an hour in Shelton. I'm comparing myself to Mitch Hedberg. Last night in a cantina, which I did an hour of jokes, and what percentage of those jokes worked is 100%. They were all from okay to great in response. He would, overall, you would say that was an amazing Mitch Hedberg show I just watched. He would have 20% of his jokes that got nothing. But he would just like save it with lines, or like people would laugh, or, you know, it was like, I remember one of his he said a joke that got nothing, and he was like, I'm going to rewrite that joke with a new beginning, middle, and end. But it was like, you don't go to a comedy show and like, whatever, like I said, like 20% of the jokes don't work. Most people are bombing, if that's the reality. But he was not bombing. He was crushing.
Well, how do you balance that yourself? Because like you got to build material while you're continuing to work.
Yeah.
But you also have to serve this show. And you're somebody that like you do predominantly shows. Like I've seen everybody works it differently, but like I've seen a tell where he asks the audience permission to do new jokes, and for like 5 minutes he does new jokes. Like for you, do you carve that time out, or is it like you pick your spots based off of?
Yeah, I pick my spots. I go, depending on what the topic is, I go, I think this is a spot to try that. I think it'll work. And a lot of times it's stuff I riff, and then I go, is that a joke? Maybe that's a joke. And then I try it again. That's why I tape all my shows, at least audio, so I can listen back and go, is it? And they don't all work. I mean, there's some like things that were like, I considered brilliant riffs that were never bits.
Because sometimes it's in the moment, just with that group of people.
But yeah, I just kind of stick it in. I just go, I never go like, I'm going to open with the new stuff, or I just stick it in. The benefit of that is you can kind of cover it with stuff you know works. The hard part about that is like, it's a big expectation for a new joke to be like, you have to be as good as the not new jokes, you know? Look, so every once in a while I'll go to an open mic and I'll just do new stuff. That's a different vibe. But it's like, it's interesting because I'm getting ready to record another album. I'm probably on a every 3 year or so basis. I do a new album.
Is it a new, like, once you're done with it, is that hour done and like you move on to something new? Or?
No, that's the difference. This is part of the privilege of not being famous. Is just like I'm not, I'm not putting it out on Netflix and then I go, I can never do any of these jokes again. I go, I don't get paid to write material. No one is paying me to write material. I get paid to kill. And so that is first priority. Look, I'm writing enough. I'm working enough new stuff then. And like I said, every 3 years or so, I have a new hour. So that's not nothing. But it's also like, I'm not going to ever be like, I'm never doing this joke again. There are jokes that I don't do anymore because I just stopped doing them. Every time you write something new, something's got to go. Yeah. It's that process. But it's like, I have never said that hour is gone. I will never do that hour again.
Is that sort of like that your generation's mentality? Because there's been this shift with the internet where it's like, like you're talking about, like, I'm done with the hour. Like, what does that, I don't know what I'm trying to ask here. A lot of people that are of like my class or whatever you would say, like, once you've done the jokes, laid them down, you don't do them again. Yeah. Like, why would you press back on that?
I blame Louis C.K. for this and a few other things, but, but he started talking about that new hour a year thing. He said Carlin did a new hour every year. It was more like every 2 years, but what gets not told in that Carlin tale of how he did a new hour special for HBO every 2 years is people will go see him wherever, in Las Vegas, in some theater in whatever town they lived in. He would come out with a clipboard of notes and read I've heard it and seen video of him doing that. And people hated it. Yeah. People now, to his credit, he's like, I'm trying to do a thing. And this is the thing I'm doing. It's going to pay off in a special I hope you enjoy for years to come. But for those people who paid money that night to watch a legend of comedy read out of a notebook for a lot of money, So I think that kind of started that idea. Look, when I first started, there was people who wrote an hour of comedy, and that was like, well, I did that. I'll ride that out until I die in my van at 52. That was like, you just didn't write anymore. So I don't think that was good. Yeah. But I'm looking for a sweet spot. I'm looking for the middle because, again, people, newish people at your level or newer, it's like that obsession with, and part of it's the internet, but that obsession with Constant Contact or my new hour. I mean, no one heard your old fucking hour. Shut up. No one cares. I'm running my new 30. I'm like, no one gives a fuck. I go back to...
I'm so glad that you said that. It's just so great hearing. Like, I hope newer people listen to that particular part.
We always should be writing. We always should be trying to get better. And hopefully, again, it's like I said, you write something new, something old's got to go. But it's like, it's kind of silly to... This is, okay, you want a real convoluted metaphor? It might not be a metaphor, but have you ever seen chainsaw art?
Like the carvings of bear? Yeah.
It's usually a bear.
I have one
right do you really?
here. Yeah,
That's fucking great. That's great. I did not anticipate a visual aid for my convoluted chainsaw art comedy metaphor. Oh yeah, there you go. That's great. There we go. Okay, now I can tell this chainsaw art story with this. Just turned into a one-man show.
It's like a TED Talk.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so look, this was made with a chainsaw, which is actually really fucking impressive.
Yeah,
But like,
why I have that, I cannot tell you. But
let's say for a second, this was not made with a chainsaw. It's a lot less impressive. Because you're like, someone carved this bear, and you're like, well, that's pretty decent, I guess. And you're like, no, let me finish. Someone carved this bear with a chainsaw, and you're like, holy shit, that's really impressive.
yeah.
That's how I feel about your new hour of comedy, where you're like, how was that comedy? And you're like, I guess it was okay. And then you're like, I wrote it all this year. And then I go, oh, that is impressive. I didn't know that you wrote all of this in a year. What I'm saying is, I don't want to make chainsaw comedy. I want to make a good fucking hour of comedy that fucking levels the room and changes the chemistry of their lives for at least one evening. I don't give a shit about, I always want to write new stuff, but I'm trying to kill. So
it's a much finer level, like an intricate approach to your hour, where you're obsessing about the details, and instead of having a larger number of topics, it's can you get the most out of these topics that you're doing?
And they're only they're never. I gotta keep the bear now. At what point can I put the bear
when you
down?
start talking? You gotta start talking it a little bit.
This is my act.
You can take him with you if you need to.
I don't know what I was saying. What was I
there's a
talking
glass
about?
under him now.
Shit, I almost. Okay. So. I tried to set the bear on a glass like it was a circus, but what was I talking about? Shit.
The intricacy, the detail.
I'm always look. The best feeling in comedy is a new joke that works. The worst feeling is an old joke that doesn't. That's true at every level, but it's like I'm still trying to I don't think people are open mic fine. How do you think you're going to move ahead in comedy? How you move ahead in comedy is doing well. Mm-hmm. It's not I did all new stuff tonight. No, what booker goes, they're going to have a new set every time. Won't that be great? No, it's lit. People book comedy, like those, the old laugh meter things on old game shows where whoa, that's how they're booking comedy. The words coming out of your mouth literally don't even matter. They're just in the back of the room going, hit the red or you don't come back.
But this is I hate this topic because I've been in the back of the room, and when you see someone hacky shit that's destroying,
absolutely,
you're like, fuck the meter, because there is that is the other side of New York and shit, where you have these audiences that they do not give it up unless it's the funniest shit that they've ever seen, and you see just the level of comedy just rising, just some of the shit that you're seeing is. And the way people kill, and do you think this was something I wanted to ask you? You are pretty rare. You don't have a lot of peers at this point. There are not that many people in this area with as much experience as you have, and you can go and bounce ideas off of people and stuff, but do you think that hurts you at all to not there are guys that are 20 years in New York or LA that they're around people at their level constantly?
Well, yeah, I think I don't have a class because I probably would have if people stuck with it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And so, I know some Seattle headliners that started before me, but I don't really, there's not anyone, there's a few people maybe around that do it part-time that I kind of remember from when I started, but I don't have that class. But also, New York, LA, it's our Seattle experience is I work with you in Seattle. You go, do you want to come on my podcast? I do. Sometimes in New York and LA, it's that experience is I have a new show on Hulu do you want to play the bartender? Like, that's a different level of like,
Oh, for sure.
you know what I mean? It's like, in the way that I'm saying my friends and colleagues have gotten me most of my gigs, I think that's also can be true for TV and movies. And look at Attell. Attell's been in so many Amy Schumer movies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she named her child, his middle name is Attell. I think they changed it because it was creepy, but like it's a relationship based business for sure.
Yeah. So if you can have relationships with people, you know, if you get a relationship with me, eventually you can open for me in a Mexican restaurant in Shelton. You know, but so it is. Yeah.
But to not have, I mean, that's a good example of like Attell's kind of on his own. Like Geraldo died. Artie Lang dropped off.
I know.
You know, all these guys, and so like as they've gotten older, I've heard cases of like Bobby Kelly is somebody that I've had multiple headliners tell me how important his role has been in helping them, like just starting younger. Like, do you think at some point like you're getting more from your openers than like you're giving almost, like because they're taking you back to where you started and does that make sense? Or
what do you mean I'm getting more than I don't
like there's a mentorship that kind of happens in comedy where if you have somebody opening for you, you kind of show them you know, etiquette, things like that. But like, what are you getting out of it at being that person's mentor?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I started headlining so fast. I didn't feel that way then, but I started headlining so fast in the Northwest that it's like I didn't really even here get to build that many relationships with headliners because I was like, you know, once you're both headlining, it's like
you don't see each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it is. Yeah, I do feel. I mean, I get something out of everyone I work for. Or they make me think about comedy in a different way, even if they're asking me questions. Or I'm also not. I don't really give. I just pontificated with my bear, but like specific advice about people's sets. If they ask me, I'll tell them. But I'm not. That's not really my thing.
Yeah.
To like just bring up.
And to be fair, like what works for you in that regard, that might work great for you.
Yeah.
But the other side, like I've seen people where, you know, an argument can be made for Carlin. You know, like I think
it worked out for him.
Yeah, it worked fine.
It worked out.
And like your situation's much different than his situation.
Yeah.
Anybody else. And so it's like apples to oranges. But
yeah,
I have to imagine though at times where you're like kind of looking around, there's like you're like who in my class is even around? Like it's
I know. That part is. That is weird to me. That you know, it just worked out that way. The amount of hilarious people that I've met who just didn't need to do it, or they moved on to something else, or just didn't, you know, and then I guess the flip side of that is some people that really didn't ever seem to have an aptitude for it. That
just keep going.
There's nothing wrong with that either. You know, maybe there's something to be said for every scene in America. We get to vote out one person a year. Where you're like, look, you've been doing that same 5 minutes at open mic for pretty near a decade.
Yeah.
And nothing personal. We all had to vote. I'm sorry.
If you've noticed the past 5 years, we've all been going out to smoke when you go up.
Nothing. It's like a reality show. Like they made me pick someone to vote off the island. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Yeah. It's not.
You happen to be the person. We didn't all meet ahead of time and talk about this.
It was not unanimous, by the way. This was. But you are gonna have to never perform comedy in this state again. I'm so sorry.
So funny. All right. Well, we're at like an hour 30. That's usually what we shoot for. But
all right.
Before we go, just. Like long term, like what do you have anything that, I mean, you shot specials, you got the album coming up. What would you like to do?
I mean, you know, the very vague goal of do what I do now, but get better at it and have more people come see me on purpose. That is still there. I mean, I kind of have more online life than I used to. Mm-hmm. Like pre-pandemic, especially, you know, that's the only thing that got better for me is like, you know, I have like whatever, 143,000 TikTok followers, and some of my YouTube stuff's getting views because DryBar people come over. So like that part is cool. That's kind of new to me. Mm-hmm. That's kind of new to me. Getting views. 2 specials on YouTube, by the way. I mean, 2 full-length shows. Is a 1-camera shoot a special? I don't know.
I thought it was very good.
I appreciate that. So it's I don't know. I don't really know. I don't really have any. There's no big. You know, I have another book that'll come out someday. There's no big
check mark you're trying to get.
There's no big check marks, and that's kind of how I live my life because, you know, I
could be back at Walmart any moment.
I feel like every once in a while I'll still get a text that's like, "We just changed this on the app," and I'm like, "Good to hear from you."
I didn't forget.
But it's look, partly, who am I to tell the universe what it is I need? Mm-hmm. Many of the things, and I wanted my band to make it really bad. If that would have happened, I would not be a comedian. If I didn't think I wanted children. I have 3 of them. They're one of the biggest, most important things in my life. That sounds bad. They are the most important thing in my life. I also like bowling. I have a lot of interests. But it's like there's so many things in my life that are like so important to me and so fulfilling that were not my original idea.
Yeah.
That it's like it feels kind of preposterous to like I'm going to write out what I think I want because historically what I think I want is not always the best. You know?
Oh, I think almost anybody can say that.
Yeah.
Unless you won the lottery.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So,
dude, thanks for the time.
Oh, of course. I pontificated like an asshole.
No, I
picked up a bear.
Grab the bear one more time and then let everybody know who's watching or whatever. Where can they find your stuff online and social media?
To check out my chainsaw art, go to GabrielRutledge.com. I think you can get to everywhere from my website, but you know, all the social medias, I have YouTube specials. I have a podcast called The Drive Home with Gabriel Rutledge that I record while driving home, from gigs. Check that out. I have books. I have a children. I have so much content for you to ignore or enjoy.
Dude, thanks for coming on. This was awesome. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell on YouTube. If you got any questions for myself or Gabe, throw it in the comments. Doing that helps us with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're just listening, make sure to rate and review us. All of these, there's so many things. I know. Rate, review, like the podcast, and then follow us on Instagram at FNFPod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. Welcome to my wave pool, my wave pool. 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 Welcome to my wave pool.